Hi, boys and girls, and welcome to today's math lesson. We're going to be starting a brand new chapter today on data and graphing. Now, before we do that, I do want to let you know that your area and perimeter test score has been released to you, and you'll find that in your email. Now, I do encourage everyone to check their score and go through their test to see what mistakes you may have made. Now, I did notice that quite a few students struggled, and so what I would like to do is make myself available tomorrow at noon. I'm going to set up a Zoom meeting for anyone that wants to join me and go through the test one question at a time. So that is completely optional. However, I do encourage you, especially if you find that your test score is not exactly what you were hoping for, just to meet with me and go through it step by step so we can find our mistakes, okay? Boys and girls, just know that you're doing a great job. I know that this virtual learning has not been easy for you and for me. So learning the information in this way is not the same as in person. So don't be too discouraged by your score. That's why I'm going to make myself available to you tomorrow to talk about it, okay? All right, let's go ahead and get started. Boys and girls, in this chapter, we're going to be learning about two types of graphs, bar graphs and line plots. So what are they? Bar graphs and line plots help to organize data or information. So if you look at the bottom, you'll see your bar graph and you'll see an example of a line plot. The bar graph might look a little bit more familiar to you. Some of you, in fact, most of you or all of you, have probably seen a type of bar graph before, okay? The line plot might look a little bit new. This is something that I'm going to introduce to you toward the end of this chapter. Now, I'm sure something you notice right away is that both the line plot and the bar graph represent data, right, in similar ways. However, you can also see some obvious differences between the two, right? As in the bars in the bar graph, whereas here you have X's in the line plot. All right, so you can clearly see the similarities of the two as well as the differences. Okay, let's just pause for a moment. This is the bar graph from the previous slide that I've just enlarged for you. And I want you to see what kind of information you can gain from this bar graph. Just pause the video while you make some observations now. Okay, boys and girls. So I hope that you paused the video for a couple of minutes while you looked around at this bar graph. And here are a few things that I noticed, right? I always like to read the title and the labels on my bar graph first. So the title of this bar graph tells us a little bit more about what kind of information was collected. It says, what kind of pet do you own? Okay, so it looks like that whoever was collecting this data was asking people about their pets. Now over here on the vertical axis, which we'll talk about in the next couple slides, we see a label that says number of people. And on the horizontal axis, we see the types of pets. So I see a rabbit, dog, cat, goldfish, and hamster. So now I get a clearer picture as to what kind of data is represented here. So for example, if I was to look quickly at this bar graph, this could represent anything, like what kind of food is your favorite, or how many siblings are in your family. But now that I know from reading the labels that this is specifically about the types of pets that people own. So let's see, one other thing that I noticed is that cat seemed to be the most popular type of pet that is owned by the people who were surveyed. In fact, it looks like 11 people out of the total number of people surveyed have cats. It also looks like rabbit was the least popular pet to own, with 4 people owning a rabbit. So boys and girls, without having learned anything about bar graphs yet in this chapter, you have already interpreted the information pretty well so far. Okay, the next couple of slides, I really want to focus on vocabulary. So I talked a little bit about the vertical axis on the previous slide. So the word vertical means upright position or up and down. Okay, so as you can see, this is the same bar graph from the previous slide. This was our vertical axis and it did contain our numbers, right? The number of people. The word horizontal is side to side or parallel to the ground. Okay, so if you look at this bar graph, you'll see the difference between the vertical bars, right? This is actually called a vertical bar graph, where the bars go up and down. And this is what we call a horizontal bar graph for obvious reasons, being that the bars actually go horizontally, okay? The word axis, you heard me mention that in the previous slide, is the vertical or horizontal side of a graph, okay? So really, the word axis just is a fancy word for side. So for example, here is the vertical axis of this bar graph. Here is the horizontal axis of this bar graph. On the vertical axis, we have the number of people, and on the horizontal axis, we have the name of the pets. Now in this bar graph, which says fruits in Sarah's picnic basket, it looks like the horizontal axis has the number of fruits, and the vertical axis has the kind of fruits. Great job, everybody. Okay, some more important vocabulary. Scale. The scale is the numbers that run along the vertical or horizontal axis of a graph that show the value of the bar. So again, here are the two bar graphs from the previous slide, okay? So this here is our scale, okay? So the numbers on our bar graph are simply known as the scale. So axis means side, right? It's a fancy word for side. And scale is a fancy word for numbers. So over here, the scale is on the horizontal axis, and on this bar graph, the scale is on the vertical axis. So something that you might notice is that when the scale is vertical, the bars will be vertical, and when the scale is horizontal, the bars will be horizontal. Finally, boys and girls, survey is a collection of facts gathered and used to represent data. So boys and girls, how can we create a bar graph? We have to collect data somehow, right? Data, which means information. And the best way to collect information is to collect a survey, or to conduct a survey, I should say. So ways that we collect data. Obviously, what you're going to do to collect your data is to go ahead and ask your friends or your family questions about information that you want to gain. Okay? And once you do that, you can collect your data in, for example, a tally chart like the one at the bottom. So for example, this says fruits in Sarah's picnic basket. Now you can see that there are the kinds of fruits listed here, plum, pear, and orange. And it looks like, I don't know if Sarah conducted this survey, but she collected her information using tally marks. Okay? So for example, we can see that there are 3 plums in her picnic basket. There are 4 pears in her picnic basket, and there are 7 oranges in her picnic basket. So while you're collecting or conducting your survey, you want to make sure that you're putting this information somewhere. And you can always use a tally chart, okay? Or you can just simply write the numbers, but making some sort of graph like this, we should say like a pre-graph or like a chart to the actual graph, is going to help us organize our information into a bar graph or a line plot. So boys and girls, we're going to stop our lesson there today. This one was a really short one because what I would like you to do is you'll notice that today's math assignment in your Google Classroom page is actually a question. And all I want you to do is answer that question, okay? Because I am going to be collecting data. So my question to you is actually a survey, right? I'm administering a survey to you. You are going to answer that question, and the answers to that question will be my data. Now, what I'm going to do tomorrow is show you how I collected the data using a tally chart, okay, or a chart like this, also with numbers. I'm then going to turn this data into a class bar graph, okay, based upon your answers. So, boys and girls, great job today. Again, this was a very brief introduction to our chapter. Okay, make sure you answer the question above so I can go ahead and collect the data and create a graph for you tomorrow. All right, and again, just as a reminder, if you would like to join me tomorrow at noon to discuss your math test on area and perimeter, I will be available. Okay, boys and girls, great job today. See you tomorrow.